A single decision can transform a life, and sometimes it can mend or shatter hearts in the blink of an eye. Tonight, under the neon glow of Chicago's streetlights, Officer Damien Colt chases a harrowing call that thrusts him into the balance between life and death. A frantic scream leads him to a terrified black teenager huddled in the shadows. Little does he know, by saving her, he's opening a Pandora's box of secrets that threaten to unravel his entire sense of duty and justice. When the dust settles and the truth emerges, will he be able to face the dangerous consequences? The hum of the police radio in his cruiser was a constant companion to Officer Damien Colt, a 10-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. Despite the unpredictability of the job, it was usually the same routine: petty theft, noise complaints, or the occasional late-night bar fight. But that night, as October's chill settled into the bones of the city, something in the atmosphere felt different. The call that came in around 11:43 p.m. crackled with urgency in the radio's static-laden voice. "All units, we have a 1032 suspicious activity with possible armed individuals in the West Inglewood area." West Inglewood was notorious for gang violence and poverty, a place where dreams were often overshadowed by despair. Damien's heart thudded in his chest. He couldn't quite pinpoint why, but a sinking feeling welled up inside him. Dispatch reported that someone had phoned in the suspicious activity, loud yelling, possible gunshots. The typical scenario they dealt with too many times to count. Yet tonight that sense of dread was stronger than usual. Damien flicked on the siren. The swirling red and blue lights reflected off the puddles left by a recent rain, painting the grimy walls of abandoned buildings in fleeting flashes. He arrived at a deserted street corner where two streetlights flickered ominously. The row houses looked half dead, boarded-up windows and shattered beer bottles strewn across sidewalks. A sense of foreboding tightened his stomach as he stepped out of the cruiser. Suddenly he heard it, a piercing scream from within one of the dark alleyways. Without hesitation, he drew his sidearm and sprinted toward the sound. His boots pounded the wet pavement, each step splashing in the fresh puddles. The scream came again, higher pitched this time, laced with fear. He soon caught sight of a group of men hunched over a small figure, cornering it against a chain-link fence. "Police! Hands in the air!" Damien shouted. Adrenaline surged as one man turned and raised what appeared to be a handgun. Damien ducked behind a dumpster, heart pounding violently against his ribcage. A shot rang out, ricocheting off the dumpster's metal frame. At the same moment, the group scattered, their hurried footsteps fading into the darkness. Cautiously, Damien approached. The figure was huddled by the fence, trembling. As he drew closer, the figure's face came into focus. It was a girl, no older than 16, her wide, tear-filled eyes locked onto his. Her skin was bruised and cut, her clothes torn. He lowered his weapon and knelt down, speaking softly. "Are you hurt?" She didn't respond, only gasped for air. Damien noticed a faint trickle of blood near her temple. He gently reached out. "Stay with me, okay? I've got you." What he didn't know then was that saving this girl would trigger a chain of events that would test everything he believed in. There was more to this child than met the eye, a secret that would shake him to his core and threaten all he held dear. Damien called for backup and an ambulance. As he waited, he tried to comfort the girl, who was visibly shaken. She looked around the alley as though expecting her attackers to leap back out of the shadows. In her eyes, Damien could sense both overwhelming fear and a fierce desire to survive. She clutched at his uniform, seeking anchorage in a world that had just turned violently against her. Paramedics arrived in a flurry of urgent movements, quickly assessing her injuries. Damien insisted on accompanying them to the hospital, citing the immediate need to record her statement. He sat in the ambulance, watching the girl as the paramedics tried to stabilize her and stop the bleeding from a nasty gash on her head. She still hadn't spoken a word. At Mount Sinai Hospital, the bustle of the ER surrounded them, nurses running with gurneys, the beep of machines, the overhead crackle of the intercom. Damien stood to the side, hands clenched. Something about the girl tugged at him. Maybe it was the absolute terror in her eyes or the bruises on her arms that told a story of struggle. But beyond all of that, a deeper instinct nagged at him. He felt he had seen her somewhere before, but that was impossible. He shook off the sensation and focused on the facts. After what felt like hours, the on-duty doctor, Dr. Monica Hayes, approached. She recognized Damien from a previous case. They exchanged polite nods. The girl's stable, Dr. Hayes said, her expression grave, but she's extremely distressed. No identification, no name. She's also severely dehydrated and malnourished. It looks like she's been living rough for a while. Damien glanced back through the glass partition to the bed where the girl lay curled up, eyes closed, her small hands clutching the hospital sheets. She hasn't said anything? Not a word. She might be in shock, or she might be too scared to speak, Dr. Hayes responded, crossing her arms over her chest. I've seen trauma like this before. It takes time. Damien sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. I need to get some info. I have to let her know she's safe now. Dr. Hayes nodded and led him into the girl's room. Damien approached cautiously. Up close, her face looked younger still, as though life had forced her to grow up too quickly. Her eyelids fluttered open at the sound of his footsteps. Hey, he said gently, I'm Officer Colt. I found you in that alley. You're safe here. She regarded him with large, fearful eyes. He offered a tentative smile. I just need your name, or anything you can tell me. There was a paused moment in which the machines beeped and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Then, very softly, she whispered, Alicia. That was all. Damien felt relief wash over him. A name. It was a starting point. Alicia, do you know how old you are? She hesitated. 16. Okay, Damien nodded. Do you remember what happened tonight? Her voice was barely audible. I was trying to get away from them. I didn't want to do it anymore. Do what? Alicia's eyes darted nervously around the room. Please. Her lips trembled, and she squeezed her eyes shut, refusing to say more. Damien and Dr. Hayes exchanged looks. This girl was petrified of something or someone. Damien's protective instincts surged. He stepped out to let her rest, promising he'd be back. Out in the corridor, an unsettling feeling gnawed at him. The name Alicia. It rattled around in his mind as if it carried significance. But for now, it was just a name. A name that was about to become the focal point of his life, in ways he couldn't predict. By morning, the hospital's corridors were alive with visitors and staff bustling about. Damien had spent most of the night trying to piece together any information about Alicia. He'd called in to check if there were missing persons reports that matched her description, combed through police databases, and even reached out to Child Protective Services. Nothing. It was as though Alicia had materialized from thin air. As the sun rose over Lake Michigan, golden rays pierced the blinds in the waiting lounge, illuminating the swirling dust motes around Damien. He realized he was exhausted, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Alicia's terrified expression. Sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee from the hospital cafeteria, he noted it tasted vaguely of cardboard. He mulled over the question that had kept him awake. Why did she seem familiar? His phone buzzed. It was Sergeant Mallory from the station. Colt, any updates on that case from last night? Not much, Damien replied. The girl's name is Alicia. She's about 16. She hasn't said much else. She looks malnourished and has bruises that indicate ongoing abuse. Mallory's sigh crackled over the line. We'll keep digging. Meanwhile, wrap up at the hospital and get back here. There was a shooting in the same area last night, might be connected. Damien ended the call, drained the last of his coffee, and headed back to Alicia's room. She was awake, but visibly tense. Her gaze shifted anxiously from him to the window. "Good morning," he greeted quietly, pulling a chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" She shrugged, hesitant. "Better, I guess." He rested his elbows on his knees, leaning in. "Alicia, we want to help you, but I need you to trust me with more information. Who were those men in the alley?" She pressed her lips together, tears brimming in her eyes. "Bad people. Bad how? Were they part of a gang?" She looked away. They wanted me to do things, steal, carry stuff for them. Sometimes I had to." She broke off, closing her eyes as though reliving a nightmare. "I tried to run away. I got out, but they found me." A lump formed in Damien's throat. Forced labor, exploitation, human trafficking. He knew these possibilities were all too common in Chicago's underbelly. He reached out, gently placing a hand on the bed near her. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you while I'm around. Okay?" Alicia sniffled, nodding weakly. "Thank you." Damien felt a surge of protectiveness. He couldn't explain why, but something about this girl tugged at him fiercely. He vowed to do whatever it took to keep her safe. "Listen," he continued softly, "we need to figure out who you are. Exactly. I'm going to have someone run your name through more systems." "Is Alicia your real name?" She paused, looking uncertain. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Yeah. My foster family used to call me Lish, but they didn't care about me." Damien's heart wrenched at her words. "We'll find them if you want. But if you don't feel safe with them, we'll figure something else out." Her expression hardened. "They never looked for me." "I don't want to go back." He nodded. "That's okay. One step at a time." Little did he know that step by step, each revelation about Alicia's past would lead him down a dark tunnel of corruption and deceit. The uneasy feeling that he had seen her before would only grow, gnawing at him until it burst into the light, threatening to destroy them both. Later that day, back at the precinct, Damien spread out every possible lead on his desk. As a mid-level officer with some detective training, he knew the importance of connecting the dots. A battered folder labeled West Inglewood gangs lay open. Newspaper clippings, mugshots, and official police bulletins about local crime lords cluttered the surface. His partner for the day, Officer Rosa Morales, studied the same files with furrowed brows. "So, you found Alicia in the middle of these guys' territory," Rosa said. "If it was the West Inglewood Royals, they're known for dealing drugs, human trafficking, any vile thing you can imagine. They've spread fear for years." Damien nodded grimly. The names on the list were a who's who of criminals, each with a rap sheet as thick as a novel. Yet something else was nagging at him. He tapped a pen against his desk, recalling Alicia's terror. She mentioned they made her carry stuff, maybe drugs, or worse. Rosa shuddered. "No wonder she's terrified. She's lucky you found her before they did something worse." He agreed, pulling up the missing persons database on the station's antiquated computer system. The search for Alicia, within the age range of 13 to 18, brought up a handful of possibilities, but none matched her last known appearances or details. She didn't seem to exist in official records. His next step was to contact Child Protective Services again. He spoke with a social worker named Karen Walters, who confirmed that many fosters slip through the cracks. Some run away. Others are lured into dangerous situations, but no direct match came up for an Alicia with the details he provided. It was as though she was invisible to the system. Returning to his desk, he stared at a recent photograph from a local news site about gang violence in Inglewood. In it, A half-collapsed building in the background had graffiti scrawled across it, a cryptic message referencing the royals. He recalled the location well. Perhaps it was time for a deeper look. If Elisha had been forced to stay there or do errands for them, someone must have seen her. His phone buzzed again. Sergeant Mallory. "Colt, we got a break-in last night's shooting." "A witness came forward," said a black SUV sped away from the scene. "Plate number might match a known affiliate of the West Inglewood Royals. We need you on this." Damien scribbled down the details. He couldn't help but feel a fierce determination. If the Royals were behind Alicia's nightmare, then he was going to dismantle their operation piece by piece. A flicker of memory, her face, so hauntingly familiar, darted across his mind once more. He picked up a small framed photo from his desk. In it, he was standing with an old friend from the academy, both grinning widely at their graduation. For a fleeting instant, he could almost picture Alicia's face in the background, but no, that didn't make sense. Shaking his head to clear it, he gathered his notes. "Rosa, let's check out that alley again, then move on to the supposed hideouts. Maybe we'll find some clue that can lead us to who's behind this and why Elisha ended up in their clutches." With renewed determination, they headed out. Every step would lead them closer to a shocking twist, as invisible threads of fate started to tighten around them, drawing them inexorably toward a revelation that would change Damien's life forever. Early evening found Damien and Rosa ducking under yellow police tape in the same grim alley where Damien had rescued Elisha. The setting sunlight cast long shadows on the cracked pavement, glinting off shards of broken glass. Graffiti tags, an amalgamation of chaotic symbols, adorned the walls. The place still felt tense, as though violence lingered in the air like a ghost. Rosa scanned the area with a keen eye. She was known for her meticulous attention to detail. "Spot anything unusual?" she asked, crouching down to examine some footprints in a patch of dried mud near the chain-link fence. Damien squinted. "Not sure. Let's just see if we can reconstruct last night's events." He walked over to the dumpster where he had taken cover. The bullet mark on the metal was still visible. From that vantage point, he tried to imagine where the men had stood when he'd confronted them. They must have been right here, cornering Alicia against that fence. Rosa followed his gaze. So they were basically blocking her only escape route. He nodded, scanning the ground for dropped items, shell casings, scraps of fabric, anything. He noticed a small piece of cloth snagged on the fence. Carefully, he pulled it free with a pair of latex gloves. It was a deep grey material, possibly from a jacket. "Could belong to one of the attackers," he murmured. Meanwhile, Rosa discovered a shattered phone screen near some trash bags. Could be Elisha's or someone else's. Hard to tell. They bagged the phone screen, cloth scrap, and any other trace evidence that might be of use. Once they were done, the pair ventured deeper into the labyrinth of alleys that connected to abandoned buildings and vacant lots. This was the no-man's land that fueled countless criminal enterprises, a place where the law seldom ventured and the unscrupulous thrived. Eventually, they arrived at a dilapidated structure rumored to be a royal stash house. The windows were boarded up, and the front door was reinforced with metal. To the side, an empty lot was fenced off, scattered with old tires and rusted car parts. A neighbor peered warily from a second-floor window across the street. When the neighbor saw the badges, they ducked back inside. Rosa walked around the perimeter, shining a flashlight through the cracks in the boards. "I can't see much. We might need a warrant if we want to go in." Damien exhaled, frustration mounting. "I'll talk to Mallory. We'll gather enough probable cause. Maybe the phone screen or that cloth has some forensics we can match to known offenders." Despite the apparent dead end, Damien refused to give up. Everything felt like the world's most intricate puzzle, each piece lacking context. And in the center of it all was Alicia, frightened, vulnerable, and the key to unraveling this entire situation. He paused, a strange intuition tugging at him again. A memory, perhaps from years ago, tried to surface, but it was like trying to recall a fading dream. The uneasy sensation persisted that he had crossed paths with Alicia once before. But how? There was only one way to find answers. Keep digging, keep pushing, and above all, keep Alicia safe. For reasons he couldn't articulate, Damien knew that the moment Alicia's identity was fully revealed, everything would change for him, for her, and maybe for the entire precinct. That night, sleep refused to grant Damien any peace. He stared at the ceiling of his small one-bedroom apartment. Outside, city lights glowed faintly through the curtains. His mind churned with possibilities about Alicia, her past, her connection to the royals, and why every instinct in his body told him there was a personal link between them. He decided to rummage through old case files and personal memorabilia. Years ago, he had been involved in a community outreach program aimed at helping at-risk youth in the Inglewood area. He had volunteered at shelters, taught kids basic life skills, and tried to steer them away from gang activity. Could Alicia have been one of those kids? Digging through a battered cardboard box labeled CPD, Outreach Year 4, he found photos, sign-in sheets, and old newsletters. The hours ticked by as he combed through them. Faces of countless children passed before him, some smiling, others too traumatized to manage a grin. Finally, he stumbled upon a sign-in sheet from an after-school program at Oscar de Priest Elementary, a real place known for struggling with low funding and high dropout rates. Scanning down the names, his eyes froze on one entry, Alicia BAGE 10. Next to it was a phone number and a scribble for a guardian's name he could barely make out. His breath caught in his throat. Could this be the same Alicia? A wave of memory washed over him, a skinny girl with braids, always standing at the back of the room, refusing to make eye contact. She had a haunted look even then. Damien's heart pounded. He remembered once trying to help her with a math worksheet, but she'd been so closed off, so guarded, that he'd barely gotten a word out of her. Could that same girl now be the terrified 16-year-old he'd saved? The timelines roughly matched. The coincidence felt too strong to ignore. He carefully set the sheet aside, noticing that the phone number and guardian's name were illegible. The next morning, with no time to lose, Damien prepared to visit Alicia in the hospital again. On his way, he placed calls to old colleagues who had also worked the outreach programs, hoping someone remembered her. Most of them drew a blank, although one or two vaguely recalled a quiet girl named Alicia who vanished from the program abruptly. No one knew why. When he arrived at Mount Sinai, he found Alicia's hospital room empty. Panic shot through him. He flagged down a nurse, only to learn that Dr. Hayes had just released Alicia under official protective custody. She had been transferred to a secure facility for minors under police protection. Relieved yet anxious, he hurried there. At the secure facility, the guards recognized him and let him in. He found Alicia pacing restlessly in a small lounge area. She looked up the moment he stepped in, a flicker of recognition lighting her eyes. "Officer Colt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave her a gentle nod. "Alicia, I think we may have met before, a long time ago. You used to attend an after-school program?" Her eyes widened. Then her face crumpled, tears welling up. She nodded, biting her lip. "I recognized you too, but I thought maybe you wouldn't remember." Damien felt a jolt of sorrow and regret. "I remember a scared little girl who needed help. I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner." Alicia looked away, her voice quivering. "I didn't want to say anything because I was embarrassed. My life, it's been so messed up." He gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. We're going to fix this. But I need you to tell me everything about how you got tied up with these gang members. We have to stop them." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I'll try." A heavy weight settled over them both. Damien sensed that her story would reveal more than just how she fell in with the royals. It would expose the ugliness of a system that had failed her, and perhaps even test his faith in the badge he wore. Little did he know there were deeper layers yet to unearth, layers that would lead him to a startling, life-altering truth. Seated in a quiet interview room at the secure facility, with a social worker present, Alicia finally began to pour out her story. Damien took careful notes, though he found himself more entranced by her trembling voice and the tragedy unfolding before him. "It started about a year after I left the after-school program," Alicia explained, her gaze fixed on the table. "My foster home. It wasn't good. They barely gave me food, didn't care where I was. I ran away when I was 13, lived on the streets for a while. Some people were nice, but mostly it was dangerous." Damien felt his chest tighten. The system was meant to protect kids like her, but it had clearly let her down. "How did you end up with the royals?" he asked gently. She took a deep breath. "I met this woman named Shonda at a bus stop. She seemed nice at first, offered me food, a place to stay. I was desperate. Turned out she was working for the royals. They used her to lure girls in. I ended up at this house with other runaways. They made us do things, deliver packages, sometimes with drugs, sometimes worse. If we refused, they hurt us, the men. They..." Her voice broke, tears sliding down her cheeks. Damien's jaw clenched in anger. He forced himself to keep calm. "What about the night I found you?" Alicia sniffled, wiping her tears. "I tried to escape. Shonda was forcing me to recruit younger girls at a local shelter. I couldn't do it anymore. I ran, and they chased me. Then you showed up." Damien exchanged a glance with the social worker, whose eyes brimmed with sympathy. This was a classic trafficking ring scenario. The royals were more vile than even Damien had imagined, systematically abusing vulnerable kids. And here, in front of him, was Alicia, one of their escaped victims. He took a moment, then leaned forward. "We're going to stop them, Alicia, but I need every detail. Addresses, names, anything that could help us build a case. We'll protect you." Alicia hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then she nodded. "Okay, there's this house on 63rd Street, near an abandoned auto repair shop. They keep girls there sometimes. And a warehouse by the old railroad tracks where they do drug deals. Shonda. I only know she drives a black SUV with tinted windows. The man in charge is called Rico, big guy with a scar on his cheek." Damien's mind churned with possibilities. This was enough to start building a serious operation. But as he listened, he felt something else, a sense that Alicia was still holding something back. Her eyes darted away whenever he asked about her personal background, her family, her real surname. The social worker noticed it too, but said nothing. When Alicia finished talking, the room fell silent. Damien placed a comforting hand over hers. "You did the right thing, telling us. Thank you." She looked up, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "Just promise you won't give up on me, please." He met her gaze steadily. "I promise." In that moment, he knew that he would do anything to keep that promise, even if it meant bending rules or risking his own career. Her confession had ignited a fire in him, one fueled by guilt for not catching the signs sooner and by his unwavering belief that every child deserves a chance. But the path ahead would be fraught with peril, as the royals would not relinquish their hold without a vicious fight. And there was still the nagging question, who was Alicia, truly, and why did she spark memories in him he couldn't fully place? Armed with Alicia's intel, Damien and Rosa worked tirelessly with their precinct to put together a raid. Over the next week, undercover officers confirmed the activity at the 63rd Street house. Evidence mounted: drug trafficking, possible underage prostitution, and forced labor. A warrant was secured, and a multi-department task force geared up for a takedown. Alicia was relocated to a safe house under round-the-clock guard. Damien checked in on her daily, bringing small comforts, books, snacks, a supportive ear. Though still fragile, she showed a resilience that astounded him. Sometimes, in quieter moments, he'd see a flicker of hope in her eyes. Other times, that hope would vanish, replaced by a 1,000-yard stare that spoke of deeper trauma. The night of the raid arrived. Sirens off, a convoy of unmarked vans pulled up near the abandoned auto shop. The SWAT team, along with Damien and Rosa, donned bulletproof vests. Darkness enveloped the block, broken only by the occasional flicker of a street lamp. The plan was precise and swift. Inside the house, a chaos of shouting, breaking doors, and pounding footsteps erupted. The stench of stale cigarettes and unwashed bodies assaulted Damien's senses. Screams came from frightened victims. Gunfire broke out in the back rooms. In the melee, Damien and Rosa systematically cleared hallways, their flashlights slicing through gloom. They found girls huddled in filthy corners, some crying, others too numb to react. Quickly, the police whisked them to safety. A booming voice came from one of the far rooms. "Cops! Kill the lights! Move out!" More shots rang out. Damien pressed his back against a wall, returning fire when a figure in a hooded sweatshirt appeared, wielding a handgun. A bullet whizzed past Damien's ear, splintering the wall. He took a steadying breath and fired back. The suspect went down, groaning in pain. Moments later, the SWAT commander's voice crackled in Damien's earpiece. "We've got the ringleader pinned in the basement. Need backup." Damien and Rosa rushed down a narrow flight of wooden steps. The basement reeked of mildew. Racks of stolen goods and stacks of what appeared to be narcotics lined the walls. There, with a gun pointed at the SWAT team, stood Rico, the scar-faced man Alicia had described. Blood stained his shirt from a bullet graze. Adrenaline roared in Damien's veins. With a final swift maneuver, the team subdued Rico, disarming him and slamming him to the ground. He spat curses as they cuffed him. Upstairs, after the chaos subsided, the police began to record evidence and secure the scene. The rescued girls, some just children, were escorted to waiting ambulances. Damien's chest ached at the sight. Their haunted eyes mirrored Alicia's. He only prayed they could be saved. Rosa tapped his shoulder. "You won't believe what we found in one of the rooms," she said grimly. She led him to a small back bedroom. On a stained mattress lay a stack of documents, medical files, ID cards, police statements. Damien flipped through them, stunned. They were records of the children the gang had exploited, including personal info, pictures. And there, pinned to the top, was a file labeled Alicia Browning. Damien's hands shook as he read. Date of birth, 16 years ago. Biological mother, Diane Browning. Father, unknown. Foster placements, abrupt relocations. It was all there. Then, at the bottom, scrawled in a different handwriting, was a note that made Damien's blood freeze. It read, "Child believed to be the daughter of Detective Roger Colt." A silent thunderstorm raged inside Damien's mind. Detective Roger Colt, his father, who had died when Damien was a boy, had been a decorated officer with the Chicago PD. Could Alicia be related? Impossible. Or was it? He stared at the note, heart pounding. The truth he'd been unconsciously suspecting all along now stood before him in black ink. Alicia might be his half-sister, or something even more complicated. A tremor ran through him. Was this a cruel trick, or a revelation that would redefine both of their lives? After the raid, Damien retreated to his cruiser, hands still shaking. He read the note over and over, as though trying to will it into non-existence. Detective Roger Colt had been a hero to the city, a father Damien barely got to know before a heart attack claimed him when Damien was only 8. Damien had grown up revering his father's memory, his bravery, his dedication to justice. He'd followed in those footsteps to become an officer himself. But this It suggested that Roger Colt had fathered a child he never acknowledged, a child left adrift in a broken foster system. Alicia might be that child. Rosa knocked gently on the cruiser's window, concern etched in her features. He let her in, handing her the file. She skimmed it, eyes widening. "Damien, are you okay?" He shook his head, swallowing hard. I don't know. This means if it's true, Alicia's my half-sister. All this time, I didn't even know she existed. But your father died years ago, Rosa said softly. Could there be a mistake? Damien ran a trembling hand through his hair. I don't know, but if this is accurate, it means my father kept secrets. And Alicia. His mind reeled at the implications that he had inadvertently saved his own blood relative from a violent fate, that the system had failed her in ways he couldn't imagine. Suddenly, a wave of guilt crashed over him, a sense of karma returning for unfinished family business. He had grown up with the glow of a father's heroism, while Alicia roamed the streets, alone and abused. The weight of it felt like a crushing blow. He knew he had to see Alicia right away to tell her what he had discovered, but how could he find the words? How do you explain to a traumatized teenager that the father she never met was also your father? That you shared blood, yet she was left in the cold? Later that night, he arrived at the safe house with the file in hand. The guards let him into a small living room where Alicia sat watching a muted TV show. She looked up anxiously when she saw him. "You look upset," she said, her voice still carrying the fragility of recent traumas. Damien sank onto the couch beside her, taking a moment to steady his breathing. He handed her the file. "Alicia, I found this during the raid. It mentions my father, Detective Roger Colt." Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion as she leafed through the pages. Then a dawning horror overcame her face. "Wait, your father? So does that mean, according to this, you're his daughter? Which means you might be my sister, half-sister to be exact." A thick silence pressed on them, broken only by the hum of the TV. Tears welled in Alicia's eyes. She threw the file onto the coffee table. "This has to be a mistake. Why would he have left me? Why would I be living like that if he was a cop? Cops are supposed to protect people." Damien's heart splintered at the anguish in her voice. "I don't know what happened. My father, he never mentioned you. Maybe he never knew. Maybe your mother never told him. Or maybe he did know, and I just don't have the answers." Alicia shot to her feet, knocking over a bowl of popcorn. "I don't want this. I don't want pity from someone who's had a real life, with a real family. I don't want anything from the father who abandoned me." Tears blurred Damien's vision. He rose, hands held out in a gesture of peace. "I understand you're angry. I can't imagine what you've gone through. But listen, none of this is your fault. It's not your burden to carry." She pressed her hands to her face, trembling. "Then why do I feel like I've been cursed?" At that, Damien could only envelop her in a brotherly hug. She resisted at first, fists pounding against his chest, but then she collapsed, sobbing. He held her, feeling the weight of destiny crashing into him. Outside, a cold wind rattled the safe house's windows. Hard karma, indeed like a cosmic debt being paid in tears and revelations. The father Damien had idolized was now linked to a forgotten child, and the child he'd saved was now more precious to him than he ever thought possible. They were caught in a storm of family secrets and personal tragedy, forced to confront the shadows of a past they never saw coming. Over the next few days, Damien worked tirelessly to piece the broken fragments of Alicia's life together. He took a leave of absence from routine patrol duties to focus on the case and on Alicia's welfare. The precinct was buzzing with the fallout from the raid. High-profile arrests were made, and the local news covered the takedown extensively. Mention of a real-world institution, Cook County Juvenile Center, entered the narrative as some of the younger gang members were transferred there for processing. But behind the scenes, Damien wrestled with conflicting emotions. He was furious at his late father for concealing such a monumental secret, if indeed he had. He was heartbroken for Alicia, who had endured so much suffering, and he was terrified that she might shut him out completely in her rage. Alicia, for her part, oscillated between fragile acceptance and wrathful denial. One minute, she'd allowed Damien to help her fill out paperwork for a new identification card or share a memory from his childhood, and the next, she'd lash out, accusing him of living a privileged life while she'd been cast aside. Damien accepted her anger. It felt like an atonement for sins he hadn't committed but also couldn't deny were tied to his family. Meanwhile, the bigger criminal case pressed on. With testimonies from Alicia and other rescued victims, the West Inglewood Royals faced indictments on charges of trafficking, assault, and more. As part of their strategy, prosecutors wanted Alicia to testify. Damien bristled at the idea she'd been through too much, but Alicia insisted she wanted to help. "If it means no more girls have to go through what I did, I'll do it," she stated, her eyes burning with resolve. They prepared her for the court appearance, rehearsing possible lines of questioning. Damien stood by her side, offering whatever reassurance he could. In those moments, he glimpsed her remarkable resilience. He felt a surge of pride, like a brother for a sister he'd only just found. The court date arrived. Cameras flashed outside the Cook County Courthouse. Alicia walked in, flanked by social workers and detectives. Damien hovered in the background, watching her with a mixture of worry and admiration. She took the stand, voice shaky at first, but soon found the strength to recount her story in harrowing detail, how the Royals had lured her in, how they'd threatened her, how they'd turned her into a pawn for their illicit activities. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor presented the evidence recovered during the raid: photos, witness statements, medical records. Rico, seated at the defense table, glowered. Shonda, the woman who had lured Alicia, refused to meet her eyes, face contorted in shame or anger, perhaps both. By the end of her testimony, Alicia was trembling, tears escaping the corners of her eyes, but she stood firm. The judge commended her bravery. Damien's heart swelled. He wanted to run up there and shield her from every stare, every prying question, but he stayed back. This was her moment to reclaim her life and stand up to the demons that had tormented her. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. A local news crew from WGN-TV approached Damien, microphone in hand, asking about the operation. Without divulging the intimate details of his personal connection to Alicia, he praised her courage and expressed hope that the convictions would make the streets safer. In the days that followed, more arrests trickled in as the Royals' network continued to collapse. Alicia's testimony had proven pivotal, and the district attorney's office promised to do whatever it could to secure her future. Yet, the question of her paternity loomed large. After discussing it at length, they decided on a DNA test. Alicia was reluctant at first, but ultimately agreed. A week passed in agonizing suspense. When the results finally came in, the verdict was undeniable, a 99.9% probability that Alicia Browning was the biological daughter of Detective Roger Colt. Damien's father was indeed her father too. The test results left them both grappling with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Alicia sat across from Damien at the safe house, the paper in her hand. "So it's confirmed," she murmured. "I'm a Colt." Damien took a seat beside her, the distance between them closing. "Yes, you are. Alicia, I know this doesn't erase the past. I can't pretend to understand everything that happened, or why our dad never told me. But I do know one thing: you deserve a family." She swallowed, tears sliding down her cheeks. What if? What if I can't ever feel normal again? He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Normal is overrated, but you can heal. We can heal. It's going to take time, therapy, and a lot of patience. I won't abandon you. That's a promise. Alicia buried her face in his shoulder, allowing his comfort for perhaps the first time without resistance. In that embrace, the ghosts of abandonment, betrayal, and violence began to dissolve, if only a bit. Through the heartbreak, karma had made its presence known, forcing Damien to confront a family secret and compelling him to protect the sister he never knew he had. Yet, in that same cruel twist of fate lay the seeds of redemption. The city had changed them both, broken them, tested them, and ultimately bound them by blood and shared pain. Now, they had a chance to rewrite the story, to turn suffering into salvation. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, they would walk it side by side, cop and black girl, brother and sister, forging a future out of the ashes of a hidden past. And there you have it, a story of fate, resilience, and the remarkable power of compassion. When Officer Damien Colt raced into that dark alleyway, he never imagined he was saving his own half-sister, a young woman betrayed by the very system meant to protect her. Yet, in the face of danger and long-buried family secrets, they discovered an unbreakable bond. Hard karma returned, but it also paved the way for healing and hope. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes to the hidden struggles around us, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us shed light on stories that need to be told, reminding us all that even in the darkest corners, a spark of humanity can blaze into something truly life-changing.